And hello, everyone. Let's take a look at part 2 of our scientific writing tips. Now, as I've mentioned before, in general, your writing has been excellent. And there's lots of good things that you've all been doing with the first drafts that you did in ARP 1. But we want to kind of continue to build upon that and progress towards something that is potentially submittable to a journal. And so there are some fine-tuning things that we can do. Of course, working with your committee, they will help you with that process. And with the draft of the major assignment number 2, I tried to identify examples. And I want to explore some of those so that the whole group can kind of appreciate things to do or things to avoid doing. And one of the big areas is writing in an academic style versus using a conversational or colloquial style. So colloquial refers to the style of writing that is conversational in nature. In everyday life, we talk in a certain way. That type of communication style isn't always appropriate for academic writing. So in an academic paper, we want to avoid conversational language. Instead, we want to embrace a professional, analytical tone. And our goal is to use precise language, avoiding language that you may be unfamiliar with. You want to prioritize clarity, avoid filler words, and avoid using contractions. So I found some of these examples over the next few slides, and these aren't exactly things that you might typically write about in a systematic review or in a scoping review, but we're going to look at the colloquial versus academic kind of language, and then we're going to explore some of examples from your assignments last term. So first off here, colloquial in nature or more conversational in nature, where they say, I thought the writer did a great job in the book because it talks so much about her life as an actress. And so the example here is avoiding empty phrases. Okay. And you can potentially appreciate what that might look like in your paper. These are ones that lack details or evidence. So what does did a great job mean? What did she do a great job of? Instead, you'd write, the writer skillfully narrates her experiences as an actress through the use of witty language and non-linear storytelling. Colloquial. But frankly, I cannot believe she got to meet all the people she said she did. She must be making the whole book up. Avoid impolite assessments or hasty generalizations. So again, that may not be something that is common within your type of paper you're doing, a systematic review or a scoping review. The possibility, though, is if you find a particular paper hard to believe, sometimes your biases can be unintentionally expressed. And so you want to try to avoid that. Now, in this example, the person writes, because she does not provide many details about the famous people she met, the reliability of her stories is questionable. So you might be writing something to the extent of, it is, you could say, something along the same lines. The authors did not report reliability data. So just make it very precise, very focused on what is known and unknown, trying to avoid any type of characterization that could be conceived or perceived as negative. Colloquialism, I think she ought to use more specific details about her celebrity friends. So again, avoiding conversational expressions. Better would be to say more specific details would add flavor and life to her celebrity friends. Colloquial, in the second chapter, the writer retcons her feelings of lonesomeness despite being inundated by people, and avoid language you can't define. And so this gets back to something I said a little bit earlier, avoiding writing words that you may be unfamiliar with. Of course, you've got Google that you can look things up, but remember somebody else is reading it too. So you don't need to write something to come across as being smarter than you are. So in this example, in the second chapter, the writer explores her feelings of loneliness despite being surrounded by people. And finally, the last example here, and again, I know these aren't academic in nature, but I know that they kind of show a good comparison between a colloquial form of writing and academic. Sometimes she volunteered in the ghetto's soup kitchen, which was full of poor people, so avoiding offensive language. This probably isn't going to be something that comes up in your work too much. So instead, the example here is sometimes she volunteered in a soup kitchen. So let's take a look at some examples from last term. And what I've attempted to do is to blind these as much as possible. So that way, sometimes you might feel self-conscious. Don't feel self-conscious. I've tried to blind it in a way that no one would know whose it's coming from. Again, if you see an example that was from one of your papers, I'm not trying to call anybody out or to embarrass anybody. Rather, I could have found things from every paper, but I don't want to take up, 2 hours of time going through things. I just want to kind of hit some high notes. So spell out numbers at the start of a sentence. So this is important, and I've said this before. What was written in this particular example? 216 women were randomized into, instead, you got to spell it out. 216 women were randomized into blah, blah, blah. Spelling numbers in a sentence. The rule is numbers ranging from 1 to 9, sometimes, depending upon the source, 1 to 10, should be spelled out. Then the larger numbers are written as numerals. So if you're below 9 or below, there were 8 subjects. And I wouldn't have it like that. That is a mistake on my part. There were 8 subjects. There we go. But in the second one, the control group consisted of 42 males. There's where you'd write it in numeral form. Avoid the above. So sometimes as you're writing a paper, obviously you think page 3 is above page 6. And so kind of colloquial writing or conversational writing would be to say all of the above mentioned studies. Well, when you're publishing something, is it above when it's on page 3 and you're flipping through a book format? Not really. So instead put the aforementioned studies. Avoid using the same word twice in a sentence. So, for example, here, the substance's potential therapeutic potential remains unknown. So here it's like, okay, what potential do we need? So is that just putting it in there twice? It's kind of, are we looking at the potential of the potential? So instead, the therapeutic potential of the drug is currently unknown. So again, read over each sentence, making sure that, and it's a common thing to do because sometimes you use one word all the time. If you can come up with an adjective, not an adjective, excuse me, a synonym, use that synonym. Or instead, can you write the sentence in a different way? Avoid unnecessary phrases. So an example here is the article by Racine et al. Discussed the findings. Well, unnecessary phrases could be the article by and discuss the findings. Instead, to tighten it up, Racine et al. Found the administration of a single dose of the drug was effective at reducing symptoms in a population of X, Y, and Z. It was thus concluded that there were, so in this case, the thus. Why do we need the thus? Just it was concluded. Capitalizing medical diagnoses, yes or no? Usually no. In general, do not capitalize the names of diseases, treatments, theories, or concepts. If in doubt, Google it. So here's an example from a different website where they talk about you would use an initial capital letter for medical terms only if the term is a proper noun or adjective or if it is a genius. Otherwise, don't use capitals for the names of diseases and viruses, diagnostic procedures, syndromes, or anatomical parts. And so they give some examples there. If in doubt, Google it. Abbreviations, spell it out the first time. For example, intensive care unit. Don't put ICU. Everybody might know what an ICU is, but don't put ICU right off the bat. Intensive care unit, then ICU in parentheses. Then make sure that you use the abbreviation throughout. Don't bounce back and forth and occasionally write out intensive care unit and other times just have the abbreviation. Also, try to avoid abbreviations that are not commonly known. Now, what does the word mean? So, for example, here, what somebody wrote was, and in the parentheses there's the diagnostic name that I blinded, is something that up to 15% of people experience and can, So, what is something? That might just be an unnecessary use of a word, might be conversational in nature. Instead, just put diagnosis is experienced by 15% of people. Or how about here? Healthy People 2030 places a particular focus on an initiative for early ... Instead, what's the problem here? We want to get rid of particular focus. That's kind of conversational in nature. So Healthy People 2030 has listed an objective to increase early screening. See the difference there? One's very precise. One has more of that conversational approach. And then last slide here, some more examples of conversational. And again, this is something your committee will help you with. This is something I can help you with. But these are some examples. More around. What does more around mean? Or it seems like. The study stated. Went into more detail. These are all things that can be viewed as unnecessary. And this is important to clean some of these things up because you might only have 3,000 words available to you for your paper. The article looks directly at mental health, is an article that assesses, is not one that looks, it is to note. Again, if it feels like something you might say in everyday common language or common conversation, then you probably want to see if you can revise it in some fashion. All right, if you ever have questions on a particular sentence, etc., let me know, and we'll work on it.